Hey, it's Women Seeking Wholeness Wednesday. I'm Cherie Burton, and this is a podcast for women and men and people who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. This is episode 167, an interesting topic, recovering from the wound of male rejection. Now, if you're a male listener, you probably have male rejection. This is not gender specific, but in the context of this conversation with Kelli Calabrese, we talked a lot about how there's a lot of complexities. It can be really traumatizing and devastating when the rejection comes from the opposite sex or someone that you're in a relationship with. And it can trigger like this patriarchal primal response and disempowerment that can activate old wounds like the father wound. So this is really about offering some very practical ways to let go of any unhealthy attachment, but especially when you are in the throes of grief and devastation from being quote unquote rejected. Kelli Calabrese, she's a certified divorce coach, but she's also got this 35-year fitness, nutrition, wellness, and lifestyle entrepreneur background that enables her to empower women if they are going through some kind of a transition, like the ending of an unhealthy attachment or relationship, to kind of build a fabulous bonus life. So she has 3 best-selling books. She's spoken on stages internationally. She's appeared on all major networks. So she's really got this great perspective on how you can intentionally heal and fill the void before it really festers and affects your health and very well-being. And as a reminder, I know I talked about this last week and I feel so bad because it wasn't quite ready to go. We didn't have it online, but we do now. My wisdom kit for women. So if you were to go to either of my websites, standspeakshine.com or cherieburton.com, you'll see it right there front and center, the wisdom kit. I'm so excited about it. I will put that in the show notes as well, a link to that. But enjoy this conversation with Kelli Calabrese, and please share this episode with those you know who are suffering in grief from the ending of a relationship or who are working through their own daddy issues. Kelli from Texas, thank you for joining us today.
I am so happy to be here, Cherie. Thanks for bringing the show to the world. The world needs it.
I do what I can. I know you empower women to overcome fear, and particularly feelings of rejection stemming from, more specifically, divorce. And I'm assuming you walk through that yourself and have your own path with that. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So for 35 years, I have been in fitness, nutrition, wellness. I've been a lifestyle coach and executive and entrepreneur. And yes, I had that moment where after 24 years of marriage, my husband came home and said, my commitment to our marriage is 0. And he left. And it floored me. I mean, I thought it was like, living the dream, thought I was doing well. And that was a massive turning point for me. It really sent me to my knees, emptied me out, had me question everything in my life. And so I went on this 3-year, really healing sabbatical where I needed to figure it out. I wanted to not do whatever I had done. I couldn't be that person anymore. I didn't want to bring any of that into the future. I wanted to hold up the mirror, own my part. And I didn't really find any one thing out there. So I did all the things. I was going to conferences. I was at the retreats. I was in Bible study. I was reading books, listening to sermons, and, really did a deep dive to figure it out. And 3 years later, came out on the other side of it, really loving who I've become and the life I have. And I can actually look back now and say, I'm glad it happened, which is crazy because never in a million years would I have ever have thought, no one wants this to be their story. They don't go to the altar thinking this is going to happen. So yeah, that's kind of been my
male rejection is a big deal. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have walked through that. I had a really pronounced experience in my mid-20s where I was completely rejected by a man I was going to marry, who kind of anyway, there's a long story with it, but it was a gift. Like you said, I look back at it now and I'm like, I would have that was so traumatizing. But working through the wound of male rejection has been very empowering for me. How has that played out for you?
Yeah, so rejection was my thing. The person who's left feels rejected. The person who leaves feels guilt and shame for breaking up their family. So what I realize is rejection is a part of life. It's normal, it's natural, it's needed. I mean, it is necessary. That's just part of life and weeding things out. And it does strengthen us and make us, a better person or not, right? We have the choice. So you can use this rejection to make you more resilient, to build the muscle to get back up again. During divorce, you have so many things that are blowing up. I mean, it's like a tornado comes in and just scatters your life. So it's like everywhere you turn is like a trigger for rejection. Like, oh, the divorce attorney, we're moving, the kid's school, like everything just feels like an assault. So being able to get back up again and having the courage is the tipping point between the lowest level of energy, which is playing a victim. That's when you're like, life is happening to me, there's nothing I can do about it, to the very highest level of energy, which is love. That's that love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, all of that. And so to get from that victim place and to work your energy up to that place of love, it takes courage and it takes resilience. So you have to look at the rejection as like, okay, what really does this mean? And for me, it was my faith. I was like, okay, God is not rejecting me. And so that was like,
but you do that though. You connect those sometimes. If you have a rejecting, let's say you have a rejecting father or a male figure in your life, a teacher, anything, and then you enter a relationship and you get rejected again, and you are a person of faith, you're sometimes going to link that to a male God who is rejecting you, or that you're trying to compensate for, that wound, that like primal wound.
Yeah. And so I was able to keep that truth that, okay, God isn't rejecting me. It's just, what I'm going to believe, and I have to believe. Otherwise, what's left? If I'm left with myself, if I'm it, then it's going to be a really sad, painful, lonely, depressive life. So having that connection really gave me hope. And that's where my hope really came from. And then, human connection, amazing friends who were supportive and wise, and, counselors all really helped too, to speak truth. Because when you're knocked down and feeling rejected, you start to lie to yourself. You start to believe I'm unlovable, difficult, all these things that maybe aren't true. And you start building up that case, and you could let the rejection just keep you down.
Yeah. I think ultimately a big part of my healing path with the male wound of rejection was that they had unhealed parts inside of themselves that they were projecting onto me. And maybe they had a female wound, and that was certainly the case with the guy I almost married in my 20s, that it really wasn't about me. It wasn't personal. He wasn't personally rejecting me. He even said the words, I don't think I can ever love you. And as I've unpacked that throughout the years, it's like, no, he was saying that to himself. He's not sure he can ever really love himself. Yeah. And it's just interesting how we do that. How we take our own wounds and we project it onto our significant other.
Totally. Because we're, hurt people. So someone, for example, who's really critical of other people, they are the most self-critical. Someone who's a bully on the outside has the most self-hatred on the inside. So people are just trying to function as best they can. But whatever's inside you, if it's, bitterness and anger and hate and depression, and when things get tough, when you're squeezed, that's what comes out of you. So when people have all these hurts that they don't deal with, they're vomiting them everywhere they go, especially in an intimate relationship. Our partners get the worst of us. That's our safe place. So you're seeing like the ugliest of the hurts inside them.
Yes. And the longer you stay in the relationship, because my husband and I we'll be married 27 years this year.
Congratulations.
Yay. Well, we almost got divorced. My listeners know this. Time you knew too. We were so close to signing the divorce papers. We actually reconciled right before COVID hit and moved back in together, but we were separated almost a year, 5 kids. It was such a deep learning experience for both of us. And, but I know the feeling, I call it the divorce diet, when you're talking about all the stress that comes in. Yes. I know with your nutrition background, I literally went into a place of just not nourishing myself. I didn't even have an appetite. I couldn't sleep. So interesting how when you have a wound that gets open like that, that your body stops you. And it's really hard to go into self-caretaking or self-nurturing or self-nourishing.
Yeah.
Because you're just in survival mode. And if we do have listeners in that place, because I know we do, I know that there are women right now who are listening to this, or men who are facing that wound. Maybe they feel, maybe they're not divorced or getting separated, but they feel rejected. They don't feel special. They don't feel like they're being fed or seen or noticed or heard in their relationship. And they're tired. And in some way, shape, or form too, that can be a traumatic state. It's like chronic. It's like a chronic desensitization to what's really happening. So if we're going to wake somebody up in that place where it's like, and I hate the word victim, but you used it, and it's the powerful word, but everyone hates to be called a victim.
Yeah.
The moment of my awakening was that word. I literally had a teacher say, "You're in victim mentality." I was like, "What? No," and then I sat with it for a while and it was like, dang, I am. So that was a turning point for me. What would you say to someone who's just drowning in it? They're not feeling the fire. They're not feeling the fire for life. They're not feeling it in their relationships. They're feeling a deadening perhaps inside, or maybe trapped. I always see that as a point of power and decision, but what would you say to somebody in that moment?
Yeah. The victim moment is okay for a moment, but don't stay there, because terrible things happen. I mean, we're not denying car accidents and death and, injured dog. I mean, anything can happen. So it's okay to be there for, you may have been assaulted by something. Be there for a moment, just don't stay there. So there's so many things that you can do. One of the first things that I work with my clients is really the identity, like knowing who you are and who you're not. So you're not your circumstances. You're not your situation. You're not your past mistakes. You're not, because we just start to like heap all these things. And when we're in that victim place, we're like, and this happened on social media, and then at work, that, we just start piling. And so, in the military, even when things start getting bad or chaotic, they tell you to calm down.
Yeah.
Don't do anything from a place of victim or, anger, or get calm. So I get them to get present just by breathing. It lets you know you're alive and you're present. If you're in a victim place, you're in a place where you have so much fear about the future because you just don't have hope there. So if you can get right with your identity, like, okay, who am I really? Let me be truthful about this. And what can I learn from this situation? What can I use right now that can give me one step? And then I can get the next step, getting into some action, some momentum. Obviously, get help if you need, counseling or financial advice.
Sometimes reaching out for some people is really difficult. Getting vulnerable and real about really what's happening. And for me, I did, but yet I didn't. I hid it pretty well for a while, that I would reach out to like practitioners or people that I really trusted. And I'm like, look, I'm not seeing something here. Help me. And that helped me place that surrender piece. I feel like is just a pivotal juncture in you getting well.
Yeah, at some point you get to the end of yourself and you almost have to reach out for help. But look at any successful person, professional athlete, CEO, they have coaches. So whether you have friends that are wise and ahead of you that can give you a great word, or you need to go to some healing place or counselor, coach, something, where you are is because of every thought you have, every belief you have, every word you spoke, every action you took, the habitual things that you do, the characters created, and the identity that you now have. So if you want something different, you have to do something different. And that means acquiring new skills. You need new competency. Otherwise, you're going to stay where you are. Something has to happen, whether it's an outside person, some epiphany, connection with God. There's got to be something that moves you out of that
catalyst outside of yourself that comes in.
For sometimes the pain just gets so great that they're like, okay, it's a new year, new day, new month. Like, pick yourself up. Let's do it. And sometimes it's a glimmer of hope to move towards something. There's an opportunity, there's an idea, there's something. So we'll move away from the pain, we'll move towards the pleasure, but one of those has to happen to get them moving.
Sure. I love that. It takes this outside circumstance or someone handing you a lifeline. We don't always see it till later. But I always tell women, if you're in the thick of it, just open your eyes and ears. I guarantee you the answer is right in front of you in the form of someone, a YouTube video, someone's name in passing, a program, something will show up if it hasn't already. And I say, go to your inbox, which just means inside of you. Yeah, and close your eyes and look at what the resources are that are at your disposal right now. What do you have right now?
Yeah, I agree. And even in the quiet time, because sometimes, the world has never come at us faster than it is right now with everything just hitting us. So even just taking the quiet time, people don't spend enough time alone because they don't like what happens when they're alone with their thoughts, but really pressing in. And I tell them, imagine you're in heaven, whatever that looks like for you. If that's like the best possible place you can think, better than any place here on earth, and just go into that space in that quiet time and ask questions and see what answers you get. Yeah. Because if you really are having this heavenly experience, it's not going to be a bad, negative, dark, evil answer. It's going to be something that gives you hope and light and love and peace. So try it. You have nothing to lose.
Yeah. The power, I love that. The power of imagination, yes, of putting your visual receptors and capacities to work, your mind's eye, and employing that envisioning, I think is really powerful. Let's talk about something that you mentioned, this phrase, and I haven't heard it put together before, but I like it. Divine health. How is that? What is that? How would you define that? And then how have you seen that has been kind of a game changer for life?
Yeah. So you can't separate the body, mind, and the spirit. They all work together. I remember when I was young and I had a client and her husband was a pilot of his personal plane, and his plane went down and she got the news and she just started vomiting, like violently. Like here she was fine. She was a doctor in her practice, gets a phone call, and it just connected with me like, wow, that was an emotion that caused her physical body, which was healthy, to start vomiting. So you can't separate what's happening spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. So with your health, so many people have tried in their physical flesh to like muster it out, like follow the diet, get to the gym, lift the heavy weights. But most people fail at that. There's not a lot of people who really succeed to the levels of health and fitness that they want. So it's using the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, all working together. So it's partnering with the higher power. Like, okay, you've seen how weak I am. I love ice cream. I love, wine or whatever it is. Like it has to not just be in my strength, but when you get to a point where it's intuitive, then all of a sudden you're like, I'm not someone who goes through the drive-through anymore. That's the old me. I don't do that.
It goes back to what we're saying when you're talking about partnering with divine. It goes back to what we're saying about being vulnerable with others when we're in that victim place or we feel, shrouded in pain or whatever. It's the same thing when you reach out to the divine. It's a sacred longing. It's helped me here. That co-creative process that you're talking about, it's very alive in us in terms of our capacity to be able to partner with the divine. But I think a lot of people don't know how. How do you do it?
Yeah. So I do have quiet time. I do and for me, it's the Bible. I do get into the word because it's living and I can just draw so much rich truth from that. So that really helps. I do listen to sermons. I do listen to worship music. So all that can get me into that space. But I like to do that heaven experience, at least once a day where I just imagine being there and, being able to ask questions and receive, because life is hard. There's struggle. I mean, there's just going to be tough things. So that's my first go-to. That's my first source before I try and figure it out in my brain or start calling 10 girlfriends. And that's always going to be my go-to because I can get answers there.
Perfect. I had this whole path in my 30s with beauty pageants, the married women's systems. And when I was fully preparing for it, now this is like early 2000s. The year that I actually competed in one was in 2004. So it's been almost 18 years. I would do that. I wasn't really knowing what I was doing, but I was being, I think, tutored by the Spirit, just because I asked, put it out there. I asked God, what's the magic formula for me here? What's the secret sauce? How am I going to portray myself in the way that I wish to? And I was chasing the crown. That's a whole other story, but because I didn't realize the crown was already inside of me. But regardless, I was tutored. I would lay in bed and I would do just what you were saying. I would envision, not heaven, but I would envision myself literally with like crown and the roses and waving. I picture myself in my gown, how I was portraying myself to the audience and the judges, and just how I felt in my body. And I would do this every single night, like a movie that I was setting the stage for. And it was so interesting because I saw it play out like that movie. And then it exceeded my expectations the night of the actual pageant when I won, and, they hand you the roses and the crown and all that. And I draw from that in terms of co-creation, because I wasn't doing it by myself. I wasn't just, yes, I was employing my faculties and my imagination. I was focused, but something would take over and it would dream bigger for me than I could dream for myself. And that was such a pronounced tutoring time for me to just claim my ability to create anything. Because let me tell you, if I can win a beauty pageant, anyone, especially from where I started, but anyway, that's another story. So with this divine health you're talking about, made me think of that experience of competing and winning Mrs. Utah and going on to nationals and stuff, because that was probably the healthiest physically I've ever been. And a lot of it was my spiritual path back then, to learn that and to see it in my mind's eye and to create it with God.
Yeah.
So I am a huge fan of vision boards. I don't know if you are.
I've got a stack of them here. My new one is right there.
Yeah,
it's always right where I see it.
Awesome. I just made one in the beginning of the year. I do it every year. My birthday is January 2nd. And so every year I start the new year with my new me. But because I know you teach a lot about this, but let's come back to the male wound and we'll circle back to divine health. But how does forgiveness work into all of this? Because I know you're a huge teacher of this and you've seen a lot of success, I guess.
Yeah.
Success being a relative subjective term, but how has forgiveness worked into all of this, like getting out of victim and really being empowered and living life of your dreams?
Yeah, for me, I was really stuck in bitterness with my divorce. And I had said the words, I forgive him, I forgive him. And in my story, my former husband was re-engaged a month after our divorce and remarried a few months later. So there was just, all that was happening.
That's tough stuff.
It was. And so I felt like a failure, and I was holding my own feet to the fire and I was burning myself. So it really came down to self-forgiveness. So I decided, it was 4th of July weekend, a year and a half ago, that I was not going to leave the house, get off the couch until I had forgiven myself. And I sat down with a book called Forgiving Forward by Heibel. And I just did the deep work and I sat in it. And what I realized was that I was seeing myself as a failure, but God didn't see me as a failure. I was seeing myself as rejected, but God wasn't rejecting me. And the whole reason that he came here was for the forgiveness of sin. So why was I punishing myself? So I needed to release myself. The highest level of forgiving someone is to bless them in the area where they offended you. So in my case, yeah. So
I wanted to be ignorant of that. Why did you tell me that?
I can say with all my heart, I have absolutely zero animosity or bitterness towards my former husband and his new wife. I wish them nothing but the best till death do they part. I don't have a bad thing to say about either one of them. I don't want to have dinner with him necessarily.
Right.
I need to guard my heart still, but I have no bitterness and animosity. But then on top of that, even the next layer was I decided that my peace is too expensive. and that I am going to live a life of pre-forgiveness. So that means when I go out in the day, if someone cuts me off, I'm not going to let that take a second of my life. If someone's shouting at me or blaming me, or I have no idea what's going on in their world, I can choose not to receive that. If I have hurt someone, I'm going to be really quick to apologize, because I can't afford to spend time thinking about what did I say. No, let me just be quick to apologize, release it, let it go. And then I'm living this life of pre-forgiveness where I'm asking, like, why are we so easily offended? Like, why are we so
What's that about? Why do we get that triggered? Yeah.
Yeah. So if something happens now, I want peace to rise up, because that's what's inside me, the peace, the love, the joy, all that forgiveness. And I want to carry that so that when I walk in the room, people are like, wow, what does she have? Not for my ego, but because they're like, she has so much peace in her that when I'm squeezed, things are hard, peace comes out, and I'm not going to fall as long, as deep, as hard, as fast if something happens. Because once you've been through some stuff, if you do the deep work, there's not much that it's like a blip on your radar anymore. Nothing really even matters anymore. So you just kind of go
until
out in
the
world
next dark night of the soul experience, and then you're brought to your knees again.
Yeah.
But those are all, I think the sooner we come into a place of acceptance, we can forgive.
Yes.
People are always going to hurt us. And, you're like me, you're in the public domain. And so you sort of set yourself open for lots of criticism, people misunderstanding you, misunderstanding your intention. And if you don't have this groundedness of who you are, it's so easy to be buffeted by that criticism and feedback. And I use feedback in very loose quotes. But so forgiveness, and then also gratitude, because I know, you mentioned this earlier, the lowest end of the spectrum is victim, like everything's happening to me, nothing's whatever, just a really low vibratory state, a low frequency. The highest, and they've done, I don't know if you've read Power versus Force, but it's
Hawkins. Yeah.
Yes, Hawkins. David. So his highest state is actually gratitude, which is right up there with love, but they're kind of synonymous.
Yeah.
It's a reverence for life and for what you're passing through. And when you said the highest way to forgive somebody is to bless them in the domain in which they injured you, it made me think about gratitude. Yeah. Like they taught you, they hurt you. Let's just say they perpetrated on something, they rejected you, whatever. That's a huge gift. Like you don't think of it until later. But it's like, had you not done that, you would have never triggered my wounds that I needed to heal. That's why you're in my life. So I bless you for that. And it takes us being in a state of gratitude, having that mentality.
Completely. That is a great perspective. I decided about a year and a half ago, because I was at a low point, and I was still bitter and angry. And I was not going to go to bed until I filled a journal. And it's not a little journal, it's a big journal with gratitude every single night. And it started out being really mechanical. It was like I took my vitamins, check. I walked the dog, check. It's like, okay, I'm thankful for that. But then
the checklisted way of doing the spiritual stuff.
But then there was this shift, because I started going throughout my day like, okay, you have to fill that page tonight. Like you better be looking for things to be thankful for all day. And there was this amazing, like this whole flow changed of giving and receiving. And I like turned my receiver on. I started receiving all these things. And because I was becoming so grateful for them. And then I'd be like, oh my goodness, wow, not everyone gets to talk to Sherry today. Not everyone gets to be on Sherry's podcast. They're like, this is awesome. And then I started to track the things that I was receiving because I was grateful. Because I've always been a giver. I've always been super generous, but I was never good at receiving. I was like, no, I don't need it. No, don't get it from me. No. And really stealing someone's joy of giving. And that's part of love and gratitude too. So I actually started putting a dollar amount. So every night in my journal, I'll think about it. I'm like, oh, so-and-so gave me a book. So-and-so bought me soup today. And, just started to track it. It will be hundreds of thousands of dollars by the end of the year. So-and-so wouldn't charge me for coaching. My web guy did this without charging me. And I was like, wow, and I don't track what I give because I give a lot, but I just started to get really grateful for what I was receiving. And it's been beautiful, powerful.
Yeah, I love that. I also, I know that you talk a lot about living a life of celebration.
Yes.
And it reminds me, that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about that, because I think we get into this just heaviness of like all the things that are weighing down on us, that are happening situationally, and then also like all our responsibilities. And if you're a busy mom, I mean, it's compounded. How do you shift into that quote unquote life of celebration?
Yes, it's good. I mean, if we don't celebrate, we're burning out. We're just going from goal to goal to goal, and we're really robbing ourselves of feeling good and including other people in our celebration with us. So I tell people, create the habit of celebrating and be intentional, because if you don't do it, it's not going to happen. So you have to plan it and be intentional. Just like, some people get really sad on their birthday because there's not, then plan your own birthday party. I mean, if that's plan
Valentine's Day too. I found that's a real trigger for a lot of people. Yeah. And the holidays.
Totally. Plan the girls' trips, acknowledge your friends and celebrate with them. Just reflect on, wow, what's really working right now? And how can we celebrate that? Because we learned from something, even if it might be considered a failure, didn't meet our expectations. How can we celebrate that we learned and didn't lose? And it just gives you this success mindset. Like you're always looking for things to celebrate. And even when my kids were little, we used to do this thing at the table. It was a rose, a thorn, and a bud. So the rose was like, what are you, what's going good? What was like the rose of your day? And the thorn was, what was the hard thing or the challenge? And then the bud is like, what are you excited about that's growing? And it just gets you to, even at the dinner table, something small that you can celebrate together. And it gets those endorphins going. And it's part of self-care. And it just gets you in the emotion of creating celebratory habits.
That's so cool. Anything that's a rose metaphor. So now I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, go for it.
So Kelli, this is all really good stuff. I know, let's come back to this male wound based on everything that we've talked about and this piece of rejection. And what's coming to me as we sort of round this out around healing from that perceived male rejection, not over personalizing it, making about me being unlovable or you being unlovable or what have you. How do all of these okay, so once you come to terms with, this male rejection wound has been triggered, what is the first natural step to, once they're becoming aware of this and they're coming out of the fog and the fog's clearing a little bit? What do you think is the most, I guess, advantageous first step on this path of healing this?
It's a great question. It helps to renew your mind. So that means you're, whether you're using affirmation statements about positive things. So it's not, I am not rejected, but I am loved. I am lovable. I am, whatever the words are for them that they feel rejected from. I am employable. I am, if it was from a relationship or a job, to start speaking those words. And then I record them, I play them back, I type them out, I put them where I can see them. So I'm constantly reminding myself, and that those words, those I am power words, can turn into a statement. Like I say, I empower women to overcome fear, rejection, and divorce, and grief after divorce, so they can heal and create a powerful bonus life. So in the hard moments in business, professionally, or whatever goes wrong, I remind myself of that. So it gets you out of that rejected victim place. You're like, no, this is who I am.
Something to focus your mind on, to redirect your mind so that the thoughts are focused on the future empowerment.
Renew it from the whatever's in the past, that track that now plays in your brain and all the emotion comes up. Redo that so that it's positive. You're like, no, I empower women. So I need to be able to get back up and rise up. Because
and that's why I'm walking through this, because I need to experience this so I can empower others in the future. Yes. So for me, a big first step also, and what's been helpful for me is to, and it goes back to this divine health thing you're talking about. When somebody's coming out of something really traumatic, some kind of a loss or a rejection, it's a grand invitation to put your health first, because your body is in shock. You need to treat yourself as if you're in shock. And that, like you were talking about before, with the divine health is about physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, all of it, social. So the health piece becomes paramount, because you are, in a sense, you're a survivor now. And it's not about setting the great goals and it's literally, like you said, What can I now focus on? I'm in shock. I need something to fill my mind that's going to redirect this. And for me, it's like, yeah. And that's where the health piece comes in, where this is now your time to nestle in and really love on yourself and nourish and cocoon for a bit.
Yes, there are so many things that are out of your control when you're going through a divorce. So it helps to focus on, okay, what are the things that I do have control over? And it's not a lot, but your body is definitely one. Your thoughts are definitely one. So probably no one is shoving, beer and cheesecake in your mouth like that. That's on you. So you're like, okay, that's something that I can do something about. So this is an opportunity for me to be in the best shape of my life, the self-care. I mean, part of the great thing about being single is I get to decide everything, the food that's in the house and not in the house, the temperature, when I go to sleep, when I wake up. I mean, your house.
There's a renewed sense of freedom.
Completely, especially, towards the end of a marriage, if it's divorced, the house is probably pretty hostile and, maybe angry, maybe abuse. I mean, so when you get in a new setting, you're like, okay, this is my opportunity. This is going to be my peace pad. Like I get to decorate it the way I want and the colors, and I get to choose. Like I could be the healthiest of my life right now. This is a blank slate to do something amazing with.
I love do-overs. I love the idea of a woman taking back her power and setting boundaries and containing herself in this space where she can now be herself. And for many women who are entangled in these abusive or narcissistic, or women and men, I shouldn't just say women, but where there's been a lot of control or a loss of identity and a plummeting into the victim mentality, your rise and your ascent process from that, it is about the containment of your space, putting sacred pieces into your like an altar or just little stations you have throughout your home and your space that remind you of who you are. And I certainly walked through that when Jeff and I separated. And it wasn't that he was abusive. It wasn't any of that narcissistic, whatever. There were no addictions. It wasn't anything like that. But we needed the time. We needed the time to find ourselves, and we needed the space to be able to come back together eventually. So every situation is so different when there's a reclamation of power with the individuals in the marriage. Living a life of celebration, offering up gratitude, diving in to what you call the deep work of forgiveness, because it is deep work and there's nothing harder than forgiving someone who has hurt you. For me, it's that perspective of they just gave me a grand gift, because nobody would have triggered. I needed that trigger. I needed that to come forward so I could heal it and look at it. Is there anything else that you've found as a practice or skill? Like you said, we have to always be skilling up when we're in a new situation.
There's 2 exercises that I do with my clients that are really powerful. One is what I call a to-don't list, because we're always like, and then journal, and then gratitude, and then walk around the lake and put your feet in the grass and, all these things. But sometimes just starting with, what do you need to stop? Mm-hmm. What is it that you're doing that is not contributing to your forward growth and momentum right now? Maybe it served you in the past. Maybe it's not a bad thing, but it's not part of your future. It's just sucking up your time. It's, not valuable. So sometimes I'll have them start with that, because we all do have the same 24 hours realistically. So if you're spending your time playing video games, Netflix, whatever, who knows, just too much time on the phone or gossiping or drama, what do you need to stop? And so look at that list and then choose the one you're ready to do and start there. And then as you start to knock down that to don't list, now you're making space to be able to add the new things that are contributing to who you want to become, where you want to go, what you want to do.
I love that. Just to kind of add to that, in my coaching practice, I have a lot of women trying to get clarity on like their purpose. And so when I ask them what they want to do, they're not as readily accessing that, but that they know what they don't want.
Yeah.
They know what they've experienced before that they don't want again. So I like that a to-don't list.
Yeah, to-don't. It's a good place to start. And yeah, women are pretty quick about, that. And then another exercise, I mean, there's so many, but one that just popped into my brain is called Kylego. I'm sure there's like some psychology for it, but I learned
How do you
it
spell
from
that?
Kylego. I
Okay.
learned it from two guys, Kyle and Diego, and they call it Kylego. But here, basically, so today, the day that we're recording, imagine that it's this day. Let's say it's April 15th. Imagine it's April 15th, 2023. So it's a year from now. And we're having a conversation about the year as if it's already happened. And I'm like, Sherry, oh my goodness, I have just met the most amazing man. This year has been incredible. We have just picked out the house of our dreams that we're building on the lake. We've got extra bedrooms for the kids. And one day we're going to have grandkids and his kids love me. And so you're just talking about the year as if it's already happened.
Yeah.
And you do this every day for at least 5 minutes in great detail. And you can do it to yourself. You can write it down. You can do it in the mirror. But it really helps if you do it with another person and then listen to them. And then take 5 minutes with a girlfriend or spouse or whoever every day and just call and tell them about the last year of your life as if it's already happened. And it just gives you hope. It gives you excitement, and your brain, you start to move towards it because you're putting it out there. So you do start to
like first person present tense, as if it's like you're giving gratitude in advance.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. There's something I learned from my friend, Ann Webb. She's not doing it so much anymore, but it's very much like you're talking about. She called it life vision, like creating your ideal life vision. So you take all the domains of your life, relationships, career / purpose, spirituality, and physical health, those 4 domains. And then you record yourself talking, like you were saying earlier, when you talked about to ground yourself before, when you were kind of in that traumatic place, is just to record yourself saying all these nice affirming things. This takes it a step further into, like you're talking about, looking at the future and putting it in the now. Like, oh, it's so great that I'm, and anyway, when you do that in the great detail that you're talking about, it's really, really, really powerful. The more specific that you get, coming back to my Mrs. Utah experience, I was doing that. I wasn't recording myself and listening to it, but I was playing it out in my head as if it had already happened. And it brought up the feelings. My emotions responded to that. And I know that with the law of attraction, it's feelings that attract. It's, the stronger your emotion or the stronger the feeling that is elicited, the faster it comes to you.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, every professional athlete, again, top CEOs, Tiger Woods, they all imagine it as if it's already happened. So they imagine themselves with the championship, with the trophy, and they work backwards from there. It works.
So maybe we can invite our listeners, imagine what it would be like to be free of the male rejection wound as your story. And what if you only experienced that acceptance within yourself? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there as we're talking about this male wound, because it's not just individual women going through it. It's our collective feminine wound. It's affected all of us, really, because we've had some oppressive patriarchal structures in our lives and systems that are flawed. And so we're trying to heal that. And then you talked about taking a 3-year sabbatical to heal. I've done that too. And it was on my to-don't list because I'm a doer and a producer, and to come back and to just, what do I want to create now?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I'm also a very, high D, just driver, super achiever. I've done a lot of things in my career, and this 3 years has been about being still. And it has been maddening. It has been frustratingly, gloriously difficult, confusing, but it was necessary. And I came out on the other side really thankful that I'm not who I was, and that I really know who I am and like who I am, and continue to just get to know me and have fun with it.
Well, I've had fun getting to know you.
Well, yeah, I think we could talk for hours.
Where can people find you online, Kelli?
So for the divorce coaching, it's intentionallyfabulous.com. But for any of my other, fitness, nutrition, wellness, I have 3 best-selling books. If they want a free copy of my latest one, it's called Success Habits of Superachievers. And that's at kellicalabrese.com. It's Kelli with an I. And if there are women going through separation, divorce, post-divorce, I have an awesome Facebook page called Intentionally Fabulous. And we talk about the hard things. We support each other. We laugh. It's a really good group.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me today. This was a great, high vibe conversation.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. I know this can be a difficult topic to kind of feel into. It's not easy to do self-care when you're feeling so hurt and traumatized and triggered. But these practices of kind of letting go of the unhealthy attachments you have, experiencing yourself in the future in first person as if it's present tense, and gratitude in advance, and keeping gratitude notes and journals, and her to don't list, which I really love that concept. Yeah, so doing the work and the deep work and going into the interior spaces where it's shadow pieces of ourselves that we don't like to see, it makes all the difference in your healing. On that note too, I did create the Women's Wisdom Kit with this in mind, to have tangibles that you can have in hand, so that when you're working through your triggers and you're working through your stuff and you're trying to come to inner calmness and peace and clarity, really, that you have something at the ready. So I didn't mention this in the intro, but the Wisdom Kit you can find on my website. I have a code for $10 off for my listeners, and it's just my name, Cherie, Cherie, the number 10. So it's all capitals, all uppercase, Cherie 10, the number 10. So yeah, check that out. Go to my website, standspeakshine.com/wisdom kit, or just go to standspeakshine.com or go to cherieburton.com and you will see that wisdom kit front and center. Go and find Kelli again on kellicalabrese.com. Have a glorious week, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday on Women Seeking Wholeness.